Okay, thank you. Just with our data, we tried to gather as much data as we could. We have no real great method of collecting data, so we did it by contacting growers and wholesalers in different states to gather that data. So just as Bettina mentioned before, in Australia we call the wildflower industry, which is a mixture of both Australian native flowers and South African wildflowers. Oh, there's my daughter's Instagram name, so it's Bess_Paddington if you want to try and find that. So you can see just here, these are the soft, delicate wildflowers that I talk about when I talk about Australian wildflowers. And it's not all the heavy Banksias and the big, bold things. There's a lot of delicate things. And in here, this is just a van load. This was actually a van load that was going to the conference a couple of years ago, a real mixture of products that had been donated by a number of people from the Banksia company, from Wafex and from us. So a mixture of Australian and South African flora. This is our little warehouse at the markets, East Coast Wildflowers, and there is increasing domestic demand, but it is a bit tough at times. So sometimes we can have a big overload of product. I think this week I had 4,000 pink eye stems coming in, and our market's not that big. So here, that map of Australia again, I just wanted to point out the growing region. So here up above Perth is mostly waxflower and wild harvest of Banksia and some Banksia farms. Down here, south of Perth, near the Margaret River area, is where most of the Proteas are grown, a lot of Proteas and Leucadendron farms. And here around Esperance and Albany is a lot of the wildflowers, some of them cultivate and some wild harvest, the Banksias, Banksia coccinea, plus others. South Australian here, the Limestone Coast, that's where the Banksia company is, and on the Fleur Peninsula just here, there's a lot of smaller producing farms, mainly Proteas and Banksias. And eucalyptus, tetragona nuts. And here in the Grampians, that's where most of the big farms are in Australia. They range from 100 or probably 10 acres to 1,000 acres, but there's quite a few big farms. They're growing a lot of Australian flora. A lot of them started with tryptamine, but now they're diversifying into everything that they can grow, whether it's South African or Australian. One time I called it like they were trying to take on Western Australia with all the things they could grow. As we know, Western Australia has the abundance of native flora. This is another fairly big growing region of mainly Proteas and Waratahs. So I know that's a big circle there, but and there's plenty of other growing areas as well, but these are the main regions. Again, on the New South Wales north coast, where there's a group of growers growing a lot of Proteas and a lot of Australian native flowers. And as you know, I'm situated near Sydney and there's a few growers around there, but we tend to be smaller growers. Yeah, there we go, sorry. Margaret River region and the waxflowers north of Perth. The East Coast wildflowers, the different range of native flowers that we grow, and mid-north coast where they grow a lot of Proteas and a lot of other Australian native flowers, Christmas bush there. Grampians, tryptamine. And so in Geelong, Gippsland, Mornington Peninsula, there's a lot of smaller farms, and a lot of those farms are producing these mixed flower bouquets, selling them locally. So there's a lot of local sales happening. Limestone Coast, Banksia Company, and the Fleur Peninsula. Queensland. Now, we don't know much about Queensland. There's one big producer, well, he's not a big producer, but a medium-sized producer up there. He's growing a lot of grevilleas, he's trying lots of Proteas, leucospurnum, and other foliages. And he's fairly tropical, so that's all new for him. There's a few around the area where we're having the conference next year that have grown Proteas, but there's not a lot anymore. Premium Greens is situated up in Queensland, and they wild harvest from licensed areas and sell all around the world their greens. Okay, so yeah, marketing, East Coast Wildflowers and city markets. So export is only a small part of what happens in Australia now. There was really mixed figures that I was getting, and so I've said 10 to 20%. I don't think it would be as high as 20%. But most of it's local sales, and the two big cities, Sydney and Melbourne, are where most of the product is sold. As I was saying before, a lot of the smaller farms are doing farmer markets and little local markets. What's new and what's ahead? I think the need for us is to keep promoting into the domestic market to florists there. We need to. This is a great little Instagram post by one of the florists, you know, loving the Proteas. So it was so great to see that, you know, like, and so we need to encourage that more and more. And I've always loved to use the younger florists if we're running a workshop or something, particularly a younger florist who's got a good following, because all their peers will come along and want to hear what they're doing and want to see what they're doing. And I think encouraging that younger audience is very important. And just in summary, trying to go through all the states and coming up with all the figures, and it's in the paper if you ever read it. We come up with about 110 farms of various in sizes. 10% of them large farms, 20 to 100 hectares. 40% in that 20 or 5 to 20 hectare range, and 50% in the smaller farms, 1 to 5 hectares. And there's the 10 to 20% for the export market. Sydney and Melbourne, probably about 70% of the sales. Other cities around 10%. Local sales, 10%. And Proteaceae, including Australian and South African, we kind of tried to estimate around 50 to 60%. And other wildflowers, your waxes, eucalyptus, thryptomanes, paper daisies, around that 40 to 50%. Oops, that's it.